Jenn LaPlante. I'm a senior corporate recruiter at HealthPlanOne, recruiting corporate positions for a Medicare brokerage.
Awesome. So when you were in high school, was this like something that you always wanted to do?
Never even knew it was a job. I had no idea that this was a job. No, actually, when I was in high school, I actually wanted to go to culinary school at first, and then decided I wanted to go off to get a four-year degree. And I studied communications in college. I have the gift of gab, and I do love people. I love talking to people, and so I studied communications with an emphasis on public relations, actually. And I really thought I would do public relations. I had no idea about recruiting whatsoever.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, especially students, would be in the same boat because I went like into college with like journalism. That was my major. Um, and at like my sophomore year, I switched to advertising. And then after my internship with you guys at HealthPlanOne, I decided to get an MBA for next year and then kind of concentrate in human resources.
That's
So,
awesome. That's awesome. I love it.
so what would you like, what's some advice that you would give to yourself when you were in high school or like just starting college?
I think to think outside of the box and to talk to as many people as you can about what their jobs are, because I think that you get very siloed into, I want to do finance, I want to do marketing, I want to do, be a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher, which is, they're all awesome, jobs, but that's only a handful of jobs that people can have. And I think the advice would be just to talk to as many people as I could and try to find different industries that interested me, and not be so stuck on one path and one path only.
Yeah, I agree. Um, I feel like the only reason that I kind of branched away from journalism was because I was involved in like a bunch of stuff like on campus. And I think that's
Mm,
definitely a benefit to college is that like there's so many things to get involved with. And I feel
totally.
like sometimes you just have to like think outside the box and like push yourself out of your comfort zone because I always knew that I enjoyed being creative, and I guess like journalism doesn't really allow that as much.
Yeah.
Obviously you can be creative with your writing. I wrote for like Arts and Life and I love doing that, but I feel like I kind of realized that it wasn't maybe like what I wanted to do in the future. So I
Mm,
kind of went into like marketing and like designing and advertising and programming and stuff like that.
right. No, I think that that's actually really good advice too, is to take advantage of what it is your college offers or your community, and maybe you don't go off to college, what your community offers, just to kind of branch out to see, maybe, I think people don't realize the skills they have, all the time, right? Like, I didn't really know about human resources that much, as a kid, or at least it wasn't something that was said, oh, you should go do this. For whatever reason, I got stuck on public relations, and I don't know why, and it was awesome. I had two internships. I had two really awesome internships in college, and I really set out to do that. I even, after, so like right before school was about to end, I went and interviewed at two different pretty big PR firms in New York City, and I got one job offer out of the two. But then I stumbled upon this recruiting, and I'm like, I don't know what this is all about. Am I get to hire people? And I just sort of took a chance with it, and now here I am, many moons later, I'll say. And this is what I've done my whole career, has been in recruiting.
That's awesome. Do you
Yeah.
want to talk about, well, I'm assuming you haven't been at Health Plan One the whole time, so
No.
I was gonna ask if you wanted to talk about like your kind of like career journey.
How I started, for sure. So a lot of people start when they get out of school. A lot of agencies, meaning contingent workforces. So you think about like a company needs a temp a person to come on board. So that was like an agency would place those people there. So I worked for a company called Aerotech, and they're still around today. And oddly enough, my nephew, who graduated 2 years ago from college, he is a recruiter with Aerotech. It blows my mind. So Aerotech still exists today, but they recruited heavily out of college. So everybody I worked with was 1 to 5 years out of school. So it was a lot of fun. It was a grind, though. I mean, it is, because it's, the way you get paid or compensated. You had your salary, but then also you got incentives for placing people. So it was a constantly grind to get the people in the door and get people placed. But I will say it forged who I am as a recruiter today. And I don't regret 1 second of it. It taught me how to like hustle. It taught me how to find the right people. It taught me how to, hone my searches and hone my skills so that I am talking to the right people and not kind of wasting time with people who wouldn't fit a job. So I did that for about a year. And then oddly enough, as good fortune would have it, they placed me. I was ready to move on and they placed me in a temp assignment at T-Mobile. And that was in 2001, and I was with T-Mobile off and on. I came and went for various reasons in my career with family. We made a move, but off and on for about 20 years. I was a full-time employee for T-Mobile. I was a contractor for them. I worked remotely for them for a very long time. And I did a 2-year stint as well at Bank of America early in my career as well. And I was recruiting for bank tellers, branch managers, bank tellers, personal bankers. I did that for 2 years, which was a lot of fun. Again, that was a bit of a grind. That high volume recruiting is very different, where it's the same kind of positions you're hiring for over and over again. So the volume is huge because you're just constantly hiring those 3 kinds of profiles. At T-Mobile, I was mostly focused in the finance space, finance or supply chain at any given point in time. So that inside corporate recruiting is very different than an agency side. It's very different than that high volume side because you're working with different kinds of profiles. You could be, one day hiring financial analysts, the next day you're hiring VPs of, financial planning and analysis, or you could be dealing in supply chain where you're dealing with buyers, or you could be dealing with senior directors of quantitative analytics for supply chain. So there's a lot of different variety that goes on in the corporate space. And now here at HealthPlanOne, I have been here for 3 years, and so I was the corporate recruiter, the sole corporate recruiter up until June. We've just been hiring everything across the board from finance, accounting to marketing to operations. What else? I'm forgetting all these different groups. Everything that falls into the corporate space, I've been handling it here.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And like as a recruiter, I remember during like my internship, you had like this kind of workshop, and you were showing us like resumes and like stuff like that. So I was wondering, like as a recruiter, what are like some common mistakes that you see in resumes? What are some advice that you would give to like high school students that maybe don't have like a ton of experience to like put on their resumes,
Yeah.
and stuff like that?
That's a good question. So we'll start with the mistakes or kind of like what to put on or what I look for, right? One, you don't have to put your address. Just put the town you're living in or the area you're trying to find a job. You do not need to put your address on there. Put your phone number, your email address, your LinkedIn profile. Those are great things to have at the top of your resume. I think some common mistakes are typos. Believe it or not, people just don't double check and you'll see typos, and it's difficult as a recruiter sometimes with some hiring managers for them to help them to forgive that. A lot of the times they'll see it like, oh, typos. So I would really just encourage people, have a couple pairs of eyes on your resume to make sure everything looks like it's good. Early in career, the most important part in early, or the most important aspects of somebody's early in their career is their education. So education's always at the top when you're, about 2 years, of experience or whatnot. Your education's always going to kind of trump that. And then once you start getting experience, then you can kind of move your education towards the bottom. For high school students who don't have a lot of experience, which I totally understand, anything goes. I think that volunteer experience is always good to put on there. You can put on, maybe even different projects that you've worked on that you feel like would be applicable to a job that you might be applying to. Because look, there are plenty of kids who maybe, college isn't their path, and that's totally okay. And I think that, highlighting the work that you've done in these kind of school projects, in school, out of school, or volunteerism, it's always a good idea to put as much as you can on there. And then beyond that, I think networking is huge. I think that I deal with this with my own child actually, who doesn't feel necessarily comfortable with that kind of networking aspect, but ended up landing her a job. And I say this to everybody who will listen: it's really important to get out there and talk to folks and let people know you're looking, because the more people you talk to that know that you're looking, they can help you in a lot of ways. So I think that it's about making sure you're talking to, maybe your parents, maybe, trusted relatives, trusted, other adult relationships that you have in your life where you say, hey, I'm looking for X, Y, and Z or a job, here, here, and here. I think that that's always a really, really solid way to get yourself in front of like a recruiter like me.
I agree. And like I feel like I've seen, especially on like LinkedIn, like so many posts talking about like the job space and like how hard is it to um even like get past um like the AI like looking over like resumes and stuff like that. And I guess like what's some advice that you give to people that have been like trying to get interviews and trying to get jobs for months or like even years and like it's just not working for them?
Yeah. There's a hard reality here, and I don't want to like sugarcoat this because I think that there is like something real going on here. I do think that it's very difficult for early in career folks to get positions right now. I think that companies are kind of they're holding their budgets tight. I think they're sort of trying to figure out how AI fits into their corporations, and so I think a lot of companies are kind of holding back a bit and hiring these more entry level type jobs. But it's not all lost. It's not. And I don't think it's totally all negative. I think that applying to the jobs that make sense to your skill set is really important. Like reading a job description and not just hitting easy a click, go, 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 go. Because I really think it's important to look at that job description. You can totally tweak your resume to match a job description if it's, as long as it's all real, because you have to, at the end of the day, you're going to have to talk to it and be able to perform on that. But I think it's okay to tailor your resume based on what the job description is. So look, I don't use any AI as far as, resume screening. Like I'm actually looking at every single resume that comes my way. I'm sure big corporations use it in different ways. And, AI is going to pick out keywords. So whatever those keywords are, they're going to be in the job description. So I think, if the job description calls for, proficiency in Excel, and you have really strong Excel skills, you want to make sure that that's on your resume. You don't want to just say, MS Office, because maybe if they're looking for Excel specifically, you're going to have to call that out. So I think really looking at the job description, what those basic qualifications are, if you match those, you can definitely tailor your resume to make it a little bit stronger to kind of stand out.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like not necessarily in my experience, but I just feel like I've seen like so many posts like talking about like that they've been applying to like all these jobs and like nothing's really like sticking.
Mm-hmm.
Um and then in my experience, like I've heard like mixed things. I've heard that like recruiters don't want to see a resume that's more than a page long. And then I came to HealthPlanOne and Carrie actually told me that that it's okay that my resume was 2 pages long and I've taken like classes because every time I have an internship I have like a partnering like class with it and the
Sure.
professor of that class also says that they should be 1 page long. So I'm just wondering like um does it really matter
Should
that
it?
much?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it's all applicable, then you have to put your information on there. You know what I mean? And if it goes on to 2 pages and it's all applicable information, then absolutely that's great. I think that there's those rules of thumb, like, oh, it can't be over 2 pages or 1 page or whatever the case might be. I think somebody coming out of college, maybe, 1 page would actually suffice, right? Like it's going to be enough. But like for you, like you have these different projects and classes that correspond, and as long as it's all applicable, then that's good information. I don't stick to the 1 page rule. If someone has a 15-page resume, that's another story.
Yeah.
We don't want to see that. But the name of the game is to be able to get your point across of what your skill set is so that a recruiter, because look, a recruiter is going to have not only your resume but probably hundreds more on every single position that they're hiring, right? So you only have like a minute tops to kind of go through a resume to say, all right, does this person have those minimum qualifications? So as long as your resume is like concise, gets to the point, your skill set is popping through, that's what really matters. If it takes you 2 pages, that's okay. That's okay. I don't think it's not like a steadfast only can be 1 page, but if you really don't have a lot of experience in 1 page, is just fine.
Awesome. And I guess since we're almost at 15 minutes, just some kind of advice or any like last words to high school seniors that are maybe thinking about going to college, they don't exactly know what they want. I think it's a lot more common now for students to go the more like technical route and kind of go into like trades and stuff.
Yeah.
Um I feel like you see that a lot more now.
Mhm.
So yeah, any last advice?
I think trades are phenomenal. I really, really do think trades are phenomenal. And I think that there are, there's this whole AI reckoning, whatever you want to call it out there. And I think there's a big question mark of what jobs is AI going to replace and what jobs are not going to be replaced. And I don't think it's that, I do not think AI is going to take over every single job. I genuinely don't. But I do think there are some positions where maybe an entry level person, that's where they would start. I do think that those might be getting fewer and fewer. I think trades, things like electricians, plumbing, HVAC, cosmetology, things where it's a tangible, like you have to use your hands, you got to get out there into the world. I think that those are invaluable. And I wish more people would go down that path or recognize that that might be a great path for them. And then to the people who decide to go to college, if that's something that they want to do, I think study what absolutely interests you. Because I think if you're going to go into a path just because you think, well, a business degree is good, or oh, a marketing degree is good, that's awesome if that's what really have interest in. But if you're not interested in it in the long run, you're not going to find something that feels good and fruitful to you. You got to find something that actually interests you. And then also be open to a world of different jobs that are out there that maybe you didn't even know existed. I think that there are so many different positions out there in the world that people just don't even necessarily get a chance to think of, just because there's only so many majors within a university. But I think just being open to what comes is probably the most important thing at this stage of life.
I agree. I feel like a lot of kids get stuck um in like going to college and especially majoring in like STEM related fields. Like I also felt that way
Yeah.
when I was applying to college because I had an older sibling who went into she went to UConn for animal science and definitely coming from like my family like it's very just like STEM like centered like that's what we're told makes like the most money and stuff. So I feel like a lot of students might not be open to other possibilities because STEM isn't the only, it's not the only
Right.
field. There's so many things to do, and I feel like if you're I know I would not have succeeded if I went. I used to want to be like a PA, like a physician's assistant.
Oh yeah.
Um, I don't really even know why. I think that my mom was just like, yeah, like you don't have to go to med school, but like you could do this and it's 4 years and then like it still makes money and stuff. And I was just like,
Because
yeah,
it sounded good at that time.
yeah. I was also in like middle school, so I was just like, okay.
Yes,
Like,
yes. You're hitting the nail on the head. You were like 15, 16, 17 years old, and you're at the point where like, what am I going to do for the next 4 years? It baffles me to know. Look, I've got two kids. One that has no idea what they want to do, and that's okay. Very creative, very artistic, and will find their way. And I have one who, my younger one, who is already completely dead set on what they want to do in college, which blows my mind. And not right, not wrong, whatever. It's okay. Everyone has their different paths in life, but there are so many different ways to look at it. And this, it's journey. It's an absolute journey. And I don't know many people that study. I mean, I talk to people every single day. The majority of people are not doing what the degree is that they got.
yeah. I was so like scared to like change my major because like my mom had already like accepted journalism and she was like, "Okay, like you can do this and you can do that." And like
She's
I told
career
her that
ready.
like yeah, I told her that like I don't really think I just feel like it's so easy to like get burnt out and I was on the student newspaper
Yeah,
and I was already feeling burnt out from like writing every week
yeah,
and pushing out content like all the time and I just like couldn't see myself like doing that for like the
yeah,
rest of my life. So yeah, I just feel like a lot of especially like high school students kind of like struggle with like their parents telling them that like they have to do one thing in order to be like successful.
yes,
Especially because my parents didn't go to college and so I feel like they kind of have like these expectations and like these dreams and like obviously like that's fine but I feel like sometimes it's like when your kids don't live up to that, like it kind of gets like difficult.
Yeah, it's hard. And look, I think that, depending on, well, I think, look, there are certain areas of the country in particular where we live that you can feel like there's one certain path. And look, I have one that's not on that path, and that's okay. And that's totally okay. And I understand what you're saying because as a parent, I get it. Like I have, expectations for my kids and what I wanted for them. And I think my advice to parents too is just the quicker that you can realize that your expectations aren't what your kids need, right? They need within their own expectation for themselves. And I think helping them achieve, what those internal expectations they have for themselves is really what's important. And that there are so many different visions of success. My parents come from a very, you go to school, this is what you do, and so on and so forth. So my parents always use the word, that's a good school, or they're successful. And I'm like, what does successful actually mean? Right. And so I think it's okay. There's your advice to kids: to find your own success.
That's great because
Okay.
yeah, I feel like it's just like a stressful time. And then to be expected to like know what you want to do for like the rest of your life at like 17 years old, like I just feel like, it's really difficult. And then people get to
Mhm.
college or like they're doing whatever it is they want to do, and then they realize like once they graduate, like maybe that isn't actually what they want to do, and they spent all that time and like all that hard work and just to like please other people.
And then what? Because who's going to do the work at the end of the day, right? Like who's going to do the career at the end of the day? It's you. And so you got to make sure it's something that you're interested in. And your story is amazing that you got there and actually did some of the work in school and recognize like this isn't what I want to do. That's amazing. I think that that's like a true testament to you put yourself out there, you gave it a shot, and then you're like, you know what? Not what I want out of life, and that's okay. And that's amazing that you were able to figure that out when you did. Because I think a lot of people probably would have stuck the path because people pleasing, right? And just been like, no,
Yeah.
this is what I set out to do. I can't disappoint somebody.
Yeah.
Um, and I tell my younger one that is, has this whole path already for college. I always just say, what if they want to go into aerospace engineering? And I'm like, what if you're meant to be a poet? Or how do you know? Like, he always, he's like, I'm not supposed to be a poet. I'm like, how do you know? You like sit down, write some poetry.
Yeah.
um, and so I think that trying to here's another thing, another bit of advice for the young generation, like put your phones down and be bored for a little while. I think you'd be really surprised, happily surprised about where your imagination can take you and how you can think outside of the confines of this, because I think we're served up so much on social media within whatever websites we're going to, our phones, whatever it is we're doing. And look, there's a lot of awesome stuff in there, but I think that if you can just get off of it and be bored and really think about what makes you happy inside, what would drive you and motivate you to get up every day and do this work, I think that that's really important.